Episode 3 of The Acolyte is not only the penultimate, most outwardly piece of woke content ever produced by Lucasfilm and Disney, it also represents the completed destruction of the Star Wars universe and imaginative storytelling George Lucas created for you and your children. Entertainment used to be about creating an interesting story that in turn enabled true escapism, especially when it came to the entertainment parents wanted to share with their kids. From the radical feminization of the brand to the inclusion of diversity and equity initiatives, Disney has made a conscious effort to include the viewpoints of the extremely small and radical minority over the wants of the families and fans who previously had been spending their hard-earned money on the Star Wars IP. Of the woke propaganda shown, nothing is more prevalent than the horrendous LGBTQ alphabet soup agenda displayed in full force in this week's episode. No one cares what kind of relationship you want to have. Straight, gay, go for it. When you wish to include these radical ideas which promote sexual conversations in place of entertainment for children, that's where the problem lies. But how do we get here? How do we get a canon, live-action Star Wars TV show with openly lesbian characters creating children through the Force with the exploration of gender identities and also having this divisive content appear on the Disney Plus streaming service that is marketed for young children? There is no coincidence here. This was the plan all along. It just took Disney 12 years to reach this moment after purchasing Lucasfilm. Let's look back at the steps taken for the woke agenda to permeate pop culture and the fandom of Star Wars after being told for years this growing and persistent messaging was never there. In 2015, The Force Awakens did exactly that. It reinvigorated and awakened a generation of older fans back into the world of Star Wars and attracted a new base of younger viewers to a rekindled sci-fi fantasy after the completion of The Revenge of the Sith 10 years prior. I myself was extremely optimistic as the storyline was safe and familiar. The characters were interesting enough, and fan discourse around their fates flooded the internet. Lucasfilm had made it known through social media buzz the main character in this trilogy would be a female leading up to the movie, which seemed to confuse the fans as to why this was the focus of the PR campaign. It was just exciting to have Star Wars back. Nerds just want good storytelling, and the gender of the main character never even crossed the minds of those excited for Star Wars to finally return to the big screen. During the movie, Daisy Ridley as Rey did have some annoying moments that were hard to forget. Telling Han Solo how to better fix his Millennium Falcon, and the ridiculousness of her holding her own in a lightsaber fight against a trained Sith are just a few examples that caused the audience to raise a concerned eyebrow. It was also established that the classic love story arc of Han and Leia had been backtracked, as the two had just gone their separate ways after their son Ben Solo turned to the dark side. With all of what seemed like minor nitpicks at the time, were all mostly forgotten, as the uncertainty of the next two movies caused the fans to theorize and debate across the internet. Fast forward to 2017, when director Rian Johnson dropped his movie into theaters. It may have had the Star Wars title, but it was not a Star Wars movie. The movie showcased expanded, beautiful landscape shots, and the mood felt dark, but the story was abysmal. The absolutely boring plot was worsened by the clear accentuation of Rey as a Mary Sue, which derailed the entire mystique of the franchise. The classic tropes portrayed in Star Wars of getting knocked down and learning to fight the hardest when facing true adversity were replaced with an untrained girl boss defeating Luke Skywalker in a lightsaber duel, and then having Master Yoda express how Rey already knows everything and doesn't need any further training. Rey was strong and powerful because Lucasfilm CEO Kathleen Kennedy and Rian Johnson said that she was, and it was not to be questioned. As if one girl boss was not enough, The Last Jedi continued to disappoint with the introduction of Vice Admiral Holdo, played by Laura Dern. In some weird, twisted way, only Rian Johnson himself could understand. Only this female character could pull off the now coined Holdo maneuver of kamikazing herself into an enemy ship to save the rebellion for the time being. Just before Holdo gets her heroic send-off, General Leia, who is clearly an established straight character, says goodbye to her quote-unquote friend, while they both cry and awkwardly trip over their words. The camera then focuses in on the two as they passionately take each other's hands and stare at each other before this send-off. The message is there, front and center. Scenes like this plant a seed for you to contemplate if there is something more going on there, which is exactly what the Lucasfilm employees want. Articles still drop stating this was just an exchange between close friends, and there was nothing that the supposed toxic fans were picking up on. Lucasfilm knows this message is there, and they want it to be there, but will continue to deny it, with the hopes that if they deflect long enough, they can keep including this woke messaging, and then include even more extreme content in the future. And who could forget in 2018 when Lucasfilm CEO Kathleen Kennedy wore her famous The Force is Female t-shirt at the Archer Film Festival, which is a film festival tailored towards women looking to get into the film industry. The internet shills had the nerve to say this was not feminist propaganda, or Kathleen Kennedy making a statement hating on men in Star Wars at all, but a simple misunderstanding for a Nike shoe campaign. I'll let you be the judge of that. 2019 came along, and with it dropped the laughable and absolutely horrendously filmed and produced The Rise of Skywalker. As if it wasn't enough that the movie's plot didn't even know where it was going one frame to the next, a small moment on screen, hyped up by Disney and Lucasfilm, ended by pissing off the very people they intended to pander to. At the end of the movie, two women, who are minor background characters, kiss. In the background. This is an annoyance for sure, as this small and subtle detail was forced upon audiences, not for furthering the story, but for furthering an agenda. Disney proudly exclaimed this as the first LGBTQ act in a Star Wars film. The problem for Disney, however, did not come from the people who opposed the inclusion of this scene, but came from the LGBTQ mafia themselves. Disney had not taken it far enough. Two characters in the background simply kissing was considered an insult, and was just pandering to this community who really wanted true change, as discussed in the Vanity Fair article that released soon after. And if that did not piss off the Alphabet Soup Club enough, Disney then went and removed these women kissing in the Rise of Skywalker movie for its release in Singapore and the UAE, to either have the movie have a lower rating for younger audiences, or for the movie to be shown at all, as this conflicted with religious values in these countries. Disney had put themselves directly between a rock and a hard place, with a large, family-oriented audience on one side, and an extremely small and obnoxious vocal minority on the other. They did it all to themselves and received zero sympathy from me. With 2019 coming to a close with the absolute unknown shitstorm of COVID about to rock the world, another storm was brewing behind the walls of Lucasfilm. The former personal assistant to Hollywood executive Harvey Weinstein had just pitched her dream show to Lucasfilm CEO Kathleen Kennedy that she personally described as Kill Bill meets Frozen, that apparently moved these two women to tears. Coming off the hashtag #MeToo movement in 2017 and the eventual indictments that followed for Harvey Weinstein in 2018, I can think of no one better to lead the charge for women's rights and the continued feminization of Star Wars than the woman who more than likely led these victims directly towards their fate. In December of 2020, on the Disney Investors Call, the show The Acolyte was announced, with showrunner Leslie Headland at the helm. A multitude of shows were also announced to include Andor and Ahsoka, which were eventually produced and released. But there were other exciting announcements that were eventually canned, to include The Lando Show, Rangers of the New Republic, and Star Wars: A Droid Story. Amidst the continued cancellation behind closed doors, news surrounding The Acolyte remained quiet, causing fans to speculate if The Acolyte was just another overpromised show like the rest. With the launch of Disney Plus in 2019 and the successful launch of The Mandalorian, Disney Star Wars looked almost somewhat promising. The controversies plaguing Disney and the culture war surrounded other IPs at the moment. In 2022, Disney CEO Bob Chapek decided to take sides on the supposed Florida Don't Say Gay bill, where, heaven forbid, parents didn't want strangers discussing sexual topics with their elementary school children. The absolute nerve of some people. Even in the midst of Disney fighting their hardest to spread the lies about this bill designed to protect children, behind closed doors, Disney was making decisions to help make the company more money, as their growing crisis of losing money on Disney Plus had hit an all-time high. Disney was hemorrhaging funds as the cost of launching and maintaining Disney Plus was enormous, and Florida had rewarded their activism against children with the restructuring of the Reedy Creek Improvement District that had allowed Disney to operate almost autonomously with massive tax cuts in Florida for years. Disney once again moved to cut a gay kissing scene from the movie Lightyear in predominantly Arabic countries, where a scene like this would not be tolerated. That information was leaked, and Pixar employees began walking out in support of the vocal gay minority. Bob Chapek had been caught, and then he backtracked by keeping the scene in the movie, which in turn was then banned in many countries around the world. Disney wanted its cake and to eat it too. In September of 2022, Disney released Andor, which of all the Disney shows seemed to garner the most compliments of maturity, darkness, and grit, lacking from previous live-action content. In Episode 5, Andor speaks with one of the rebels named Arvel on the ground as they prepare for their heist on an Empire base. When Arvel points out a female named Cinta as she walks out of a tree hut where another female named Vel is wrapped up in a blanket walking out of the same hut. Arvel states, "Don't think about it. She is already sharing a blanket with someone," clearly insinuating the two females are together. The show had to make it obvious they had included gay characters rather than just having two well-written characters that happen to be gay. In Episode 6, amidst the rebels' heist, Cinta and Vel share an intimate moment in the middle of a chaotic scene where they once again stare into each other's eyes, and Vel puts her hand on Cinta's in a gesture of concern and romance as the two are about to split up to complete the mission. When it comes to these characters in a more well-written show like Andor, which in my opinion would attract an older audience due to the complexity of the plot, having gay characters is far from the problem. It could almost even work here if it wasn't thrown in the middle of the show for the sake of furthering an agenda. Of all the included LGBTQ propaganda in Star Wars to this point, this is far from the worst, but the romance did little to further the plot or develop any interest in these side characters. It was still Disney just pandering to promote their agenda and the will of their woke employees and vocal activists that call themselves fans of the content. The gay agenda pushed by the alphabet community in Star Wars has come a long way since 2015, but rumblings across the internet forecasted something much worse that many fans had almost completely forgotten about. Star Wars Celebration 2023 reminded the fans that Leslie Headland had not quietly gone away like many other creators invited to work on Star Wars. She had actually been given a pretty nice budget to work with, $180 million to be exact, which was double the budget allotted for the overhyped and under-delivered Kenobi series. Actresses cast in The Acolyte spoke about Star Wars being patriarchal and how their characters were strong women fighting this supposed patriarchy. Leslie Headland even said herself it was okay if you do not like her version of Star Wars. I highly doubt the Disney investors want to hear a showrunner of an up-and-coming and extremely expensive project okay with a large portion of the audience already hating this project before launch. But hey, what do I know? This woman worked for the crooked Harvey Weinstein, which clearly makes her extremely qualified to run a Star Wars project. Jump to 2024, when the buzz surrounding The Acolyte starts with Disney already playing defense against their supposed haters, who happen to just be fans and parents who have valid concerns about the show. Many longtime fans are not okay with Leslie Headland happy with her show being referred to as the gayest Star Wars show yet on an interview release before The Acolyte launched. The first two episodes of The Acolyte appeared to be a cheap, high school theater production of a once-beloved IP. I found myself watching every scene, wondering where in the hell $180 million went. Maybe the sets were laid with a foundation of solid gold bricks. The cast for the show seemed for the most part either weak or uninteresting. Any sense of adventure or mystery advertised in the marketing leading up to the show was instantly squashed with the weak dialogue deliverances and poor writing. The supposed massive plot twist of two sisters was boringly just announced in a quick flight scene with zero buildup or payoff. The world feels extremely small and lacks the charm Star Wars brings to a space fantasy series. This week, the third episode of The Acolyte launched on Disney+. And finally, the true intentions of Disney and Lucasfilm for what they want the future of entertainment to look like on their platforms streamed on your home televisions. This episode showcased a tribe of all-female witches, and it was immediately apparent there were absolutely no men present, as we were introduced to a cheap-looking, fortified city with dozens of women walking around in their supposed utopia. The Jedi visit as they are investigating the whereabouts of believed Force-sensitive children. These might be some of the worst costumes seen on any Star Wars project to date. It looked like the characters were wearing cheap pajamas found on any department store discount shelf. The Jedi ask where the father is for the children, just so the writers could emphatically include a character saying they have no father. The leader of this tribe of witches is a lesbian character named Mother Anastasia, who shares an intimate moment with her partner where they once again stare deeply into each other's eyes as Mother Anastasia takes her partner's face in her hands, and they discuss parenting styles regarding their two twin daughters. Later in the show, we find out these two female twins were created through the Force by Mother Anastasia, and then carried and delivered by her female partner. You go, girl. As if this was not bad enough, the episode included a weird coming-of-age ceremony where cloaked women awkwardly chant, and I'm not kidding at all when I say this, actually moan and grunt and make faces while flailing their arms around. Not that I have ever felt immersed in the galaxy of Star Wars yet at all in this series, but I was immediately thrown as far away from George Lucas's creation as I could ever be. It took Star Wars a while to get to this point. 12 long years of building. Each small introduction of woke propaganda over the years has led Lucasfilm and Disney to now feel comfortable openly displaying their messages, forever altering the story created by George Lucas in a galaxy far, far away. Their slow play at dropping sexually charged gender ideology periodically throughout their content was an attempt to normalize this propaganda, so eventually, with the right script and the right showrunner, Disney could put their views as the focal point and sideline good storytelling and world building for the fans of Star Wars. They have clearly chosen what content and what messages they want their money to support. Disney is kidding themselves if they think The Acolyte is going to bring in new subscribers to Disney+. Disney will inevitably lose a ton of money and learn all the wrong lessons just so Leslie Headland and Kathleen Kennedy can feel self-righteous in their activism. They want the next generation of children that watch this content to be talking about their sexual preferences, their gender identities, and their pronouns. They want your kids to talk about it because in some sick way, it validates their life choices and reinforces their twisted worldviews that are so focused on sexual relationships displayed out in the open to the public. It shows us parents we cannot rely on these woke companies to entertain our kids. Disney is banking on our lack of involvement as a parent to spread these messages to raise our kids for us. Advocates for the inclusion of the LGBTQ agenda often cite that Star Wars has had romance with Han Solo and Princess Leia in the original trilogy, and then again with Anakin and Padme in the prequels, so there should be no problem including romance between same-sex couples in new content. It is disingenuous to pretend that since Star Wars included a man and a woman falling in love with each other, it is now okay and somehow mandatory to now implement the gay agenda in the new content created with Disney. In the age where companies specifically state they are promoting LGBTQ content to include pandering during an entire Pride Month, the inclusion of these gay characters is no different than a company including a pride flag in an advertisement just to remove it the next month in their marketing campaigns. There is also no coincidence as why Lucasfilm chose June to release The Acolyte. The vast, overwhelming majority of the world lives in a family unit comprised of a man and a woman. These are just the facts. Previously established lore, where Star Wars included romance between a man and a woman, does not give you permission to interject your own personal sexual orientations into the franchise. If ideas surrounding the love between a man and a woman were interjected into a franchise that had previously spread the message of the LGBTQ agenda, the woke minority would undoubtedly have an absolute meltdown. I am at the point where I have told myself there is no possible way this could get any worse. But seeing as we are only on episode 3 of this woke series, I'll just sit back and watch the train wreck ahead. Believe it or not, this is just the beginning as Disney spirals out of control. How far are Disney and Lucasfilm willing to take this as each piece of woke propaganda continues to desecrate the once positive brand of creative and family-oriented content once associated with the Walt Disney Company and the amazing, expansive universe of Star Wars? Stay tuned for further.